Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Dalitha and I'm the head of VC Biology at Evo Academics.
And I'm Sachin, head of chemistry. And this is a podcast where we discuss everything study related, improvement, and some practical tips on how to make studying journeys much easier. Today, we're going to be going deep. We're talking about deep work. We're talking about how to organize study into hours that actually matter. And finally, how to balance all this with the limited time that we all have. Dalitha, the first thing that was on my mind for today was how students often measure their study by the number of hours they spend as opposed to what they're actually getting out of it. What are some things that students have to be careful of when falling into this trap, and how can they make study actually productive?
A great question. And I think it comes down to the, misconception that some people have that if I studied X more hours, then my score will increase X times. But the important thing to understand is, and I'm sure you'll discuss this more in detail, is that not every hour spent has the same value. Some hours contribute a lot more to your performance and your confidence, whereas other hours you've spent don't really have that same impact. What have you noticed over the years?
That's well contributed to study. I mean, these are some lessons that I've picked up not only from personal experience, but also from students that I've taught. One, you want to make sure that when you are setting time aside to study, you're not just blocking it by time. You want to make sure that you're actually blocking it by a goal, right? This is the critical thing a lot of students miss. They think that studying for 2 hours is better than one, when probably for half of those 2 hours, they weren't using it very effectively, or they didn't even know what they were trying to achieve. So one is organize your study sessions by the actual goal. Second, be specific about the goal that you want to achieve. Not all goals are the same. Some study sessions may require you to actually learn content for the first time. That is going to be a time-consuming exercise. Whereas for another subject, you might, for example, only be reviewing content that you've learned during the week, and it's not so time intensive. Sometimes you want to be doing practice questions and you're preparing for a SAC, but those questions are very different to doing VCA questions in preparation for the exam. So in addition to measuring your study by what you actually want to achieve, the second thing would be being specific about the goal and knowing that not every goal is right at every time.
Yeah, so that was great advice there, Sachin. Just a follow-up question on that. What would you say students can do to try and maximize the time that they're spending to ensure that they get the most yield out of it?
I think yield is a substitute for understanding, basically, and understanding being knowing fundamental concepts and not memorizing. So unfortunately, the cliche debate that comes up here is passive versus active study. A lot of us hear that passive study is bad, and I think it's mostly bad because people do it unintentionally. There are some situations where passive study can be good, but it's important to mix in active study as well. So how do we know if we're doing passive study? A general rule that I've found is you know that you are passively studying if you're tracking your study by any metric other than knowledge gained. So for example, a lot of people will base their study off time. Time is passive. A lot of people will base their study on, I want to achieve this number of pages of my textbook studied by the end of this period. Again, that's passive because the focus is not on the actual knowledge, it's on completing a set task by a measurement that's something other than knowledge. And then finally, and this is perhaps the most insidious one, studying until we feel good about ourselves. And this is a very easy one to fall into, but part of the reasons why pages of a textbook or setting aside 2 hours is so appealing is because it feels good. We can measure it. We feel like we're doing something. It's very important to pick up on the fact that you're down the passive study rabbit hole and move towards more active strategies. So for me, active strategies means you're starting off with questions and then you answer them progressively. So some techniques that can work for this are, first of all, mind maps. Mind maps are inherently difficult because you're starting with a blank page. So the only knowledge that can come onto that page is what you're internally reflecting on and revising in your mind. And also when you consistently ask why, it might lead you in a different direction to go and research a particular topic. Maybe you don't have the knowledge you need in order to create that mind map right now. Secondly, something like flashcards, great for spaced repetition. Again, if we're using only flashcards, they can be quite time intensive to make and review later on. But if you're using it with a particular goal, for example, reviewing definitions only or reviewing checklists only for a particular topic, then I think it makes a lot of sense. And finally, also another thing that can be quite active in a way is actually studying with friends. Now, I want to be very careful in how I phrase this. Studying with friends can quickly turn passive when all you're doing is just enjoying each other's company and not making any actual inroads into the subject. So the way to actively study it with friends is pick up on what knowledge someone else has that you didn't have, why you missed it, and what did they understand or know about a topic that you are currently missing. I think if that's the approach taken towards studying with friends, it can be a very active way of learning and also engaging. Learning with others is often much more entertaining than simply learning by yourself. So those are some practical ways in which I think everyone can move away from judging their study by hours and more so by the actual output, the knowledge that they gain during those study sessions. Next, in order to turn these study sessions into what we are going to call deep work, there's actually a few things we need to clarify about deep work. What is deep work, Dalitha?
So, put simply, deep work is the ability to focus on a task, whatever that may be, without any distractions. And importantly, as you mentioned before, the output of that task should be of a high quality. So you might hear that term deep work being thrown around here and there. That's what it means in a nutshell. Now, the issue that lots of students face is that there's a bit of resistance, there's a bit of difficulty getting to that deep work zone and sitting in it. There's a bit of discomfort that you face. Now, from my experience, the underlying reason for this discomfort is ultimately with deep work, the time taken for you to get an output that actually gives you satisfaction is a bit longer. It's not as simple as like what you said before, do X pages from the textbook, right? So deep work might be sitting down for a study session and aiming to understand, I'm going to use a bio example here, understand transcription, right? Know exactly what's going on. Why is it structured this way? So that takes longer, right? So lots of students, when they sit down to study, when they sit down to understand transcription, they feel overwhelmed with the content. They're like, oh, don't know if I can do this. It's taking a bit longer. I've got other things to do as well. I don't know if I should really be doing this. And then they switch gears. They do something different, right? So as soon as they get to that moment where something productive is about to happen, that discomfort sort of sways them away from it. So, and I also had that experience myself when I was in PCE, but fortunately I realized that early on so that I could sort of alter the way that I structure my study. So biggest bit of advice for students would be when you feel that discomfort, when you're learning a certain topic, when you feel that, oh, this is a bit tough, this is a bit difficult, it's important to just persevere, get through that initial stage of discomfort, because on the other side of that is something that will really benefit you and push your understanding, push your performance greatly.
That idea of discomfort is like living in that discomfort and finding comfort almost in discomfort is an idea that's thrown around a lot. What are some signs that students can pick up on that they are responding to that discomfort and not persevering? Because often it can be masked, right? Like we don't know that we are running away from the deep work. So what are some ways that students potentially can't live with that discomfort, and how can they pick up on it?
Yeah, great question. I think it can manifest itself in many different ways for different students. Now, for some, it might be that when you feel something's difficult, you pick up your phone and then you go on Instagram, you scroll some reels, and you come back to the work, right? That's one way that students may sort of decide to handle that, right? As soon as you need to sort of switch on your brain, you decide to switch it off, go do something else. Other students, it may not be as, clear that they're switching away. So it might be that if you find transcription a bit difficult to understand, you switch gears and you go back to, let's say, enzymes, a topic that you might understand really well. That is also a form of redirection, avoidance of getting into that deep work zone. For others, it might be as soon as you feel something's difficult, you just like stand up, go have a break, right? I'm not saying that breaks are bad. I should clarify that. I'm not saying you shouldn't have a break. It's just that when the trigger for a break shouldn't be discomfort, right? A trigger for a break is, okay, I've achieved what I want to achieve. Cool. Now I'm going to reward myself. So yeah, short answer is that it can manifest in many different ways. For some, that's social media. For some, that's switching to a different topic or a different subject, something that they might find easier or something they already understand. And for some, it might just be completely avoiding study altogether and going and doing something else. Would that be something you resonate with as well?
I think so, yeah. Especially the point about distractions. I think one thing I've become better at realizing is that the intent behind an activity often will determine the outcome. For example, using your phone or watching YouTube is not inherently bad, right? Like YouTube gives us lots of ideas and skills we can learn from YouTube. Often, I imagine for a lot of biology students, I know certainly for chemistry, I actually direct them to watch YouTube videos because it explains concepts better. But the intent there is learning. But as you said, if the intent is to avoid or get away from work that you're finding difficult, then running into social media merely numbs the emotion of negativity, and which will resurface again later. It doesn't remove it. And so that's why I think the key message being distractions only delay what you are otherwise feeling in the moment. It's better to acknowledge that you're feeling this way, but realizing that that is what deep work involves. And just like any other skill, it's something that you can train.
Yeah, 100%. I'd be interested to know, we've sort of discussed a bit about why hours spent don't necessarily correlate to, I guess, understanding or confidence in the subject. We've touched a bit on deep work as well. How would a student actually utilize all this information, all this advice, and actually apply it day to day?
Yeah. So I think planning is super important. I think a lot of people start off encouraged. They want to get into deep work. They really want to achieve it. I think one of the issues or one of the things that people don't consider about deep work is execution, but you need to know what you're going to do beforehand. So one of the things that I would suggest people do is when you're planning your day, think about what would be the most energy intensive tasks that would be required to do, and also when in the day you want to do them. For example, certain tasks, like for example, starting a big written assignment or trying to do a 2.5 hour or 3 hour practice exam, those are very cognitively heavy tasks. And so it would not make sense to do them at a point in the day when you're fatigued. So I think planning, for example, in the mornings when we're really fresh, this might be a time to do really aptitude heavy tasks. So for anyone studying for the UCAT, that might be an optimal time to do it in the mornings. For anyone who's doing, for example, preparing for English essays that require a lot of thought and critical reasoning, that might be another time to do it. When you come back from school, you may be tired, right? And also later in the night, around 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, like students are going to be fatigued. Do you really want to be opening up a heavy task at that time? Probably not. So if you plan ahead and you go, these are some cheap wins, some 5 textbook questions that I need to do, or here's an unfinished report that I just need to add a conclusion to, those are tasks that if you can plan them at night, then you're setting up your day in accordance with your energy levels. You're anticipating how you will feel and therefore planning your day much better. What are some other tips that people can use to implement this idea of deep work in their day-to-day lives?
Yeah, great question, Sachin. I think planning effectively is definitely one aspect to it, but another aspect is actually taking breaks. So I feel like one thing that certain students don't always do is take a proper break from study, right? So they're doing their work, whatever it is, they're doing practice questions, practice exam, whatnot. But then once they're done, they don't fully detach from that mode, that study mode that they're in. So then over a period of time, it may not seem like it immediately, but over a period of time, they just feel like they just always study. There's no proper break time that they've allocated. Now, what does that look like? What are some actionable ways to do this? Biggest win that's super easy to do is during break time, leave your study space, right? So if you study in your room, let's say, right, your desk is in your room, once you're done studying, go out of your room, right? Do whatever you want to do. And then once your break time's over, you can go back in. If your study space is, I don't know, a dedicated study room, leave the study room, go to your bedroom, go to the living room, couch, wherever it is. So that allows you mentally to actually fully detach from study and fully attach to break.
Yeah.
And that ultimately gives you that rest that you need, right? Yeah. And on top of that, I feel like another common thing that students do is their break time is going on like social media, right? Or scrolling reels or shorts or whatever it is, TikTok, right? Now, I'm not saying that you should completely cut that out altogether, because of course they do serve as like entertainment. Sometimes they're educational. Sometimes you just want to know what your mates are up to. So it does have a role to play, social media, of course. But for breaks where you want to fully just relax, fully rest, ideally you should be doing something that's not on a device, right? Something where you're sort of connecting with nature, you're going outside, you're actually getting some sunlight, you're touching some grass, you're leaving your desk, right? Yeah. So that's something I tell my students all the time. Like, just because you're in VCE doesn't mean you have to be enslaved in your room or at your desk, just grinding away nonstop, right? That ultimately has a detrimental impact on your performance, on your study, because you feel like this is all your life is. Your life is just your desk, right? Yeah. But there's so much more to it. And as soon as you start implementing higher quality breaks, your mental well-being improves, and as a result, the focus and the focus you can allocate towards study improves. So it may seem like, oh, I'm wasting time here. I shouldn't be going outside, or I shouldn't be going for a run. I shouldn't be going to the gym. I shouldn't be going to see my friends. I shouldn't be talking to my parents here, or my brother, or whoever, my sister. It's easy to think that that's a waste of time, but in reality, it's actually a very important use of your time that you should continue doing regardless of what else you have in your life. Because that's what ultimately keeps you going day in, day out.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what sort of tops up your battery when you're feeling drained. So that would be my biggest piece of advice on how to ensure that deep work can occur successfully. And that's ultimately by allowing deep rest to occur successfully.
I think that's an important point you mentioned about our energy levels are limited. Like, it's one thing to hone in on deep work, but we also need to realize that we're human. Like, we are going to run out of energy. And so that point you mentioned about intentionality, I think, is so crucial. We have a limited set of energy, so where can we best direct it? And if we are going to spend it all on deep work, we also need a way to recover. And that's why I get so worried, but also disappointed when a lot of students come to me. They're like, I'm gunning for this high score. Here are the trades that I've made. And often on that trade list, it'll be, I got rid of all my hobbies. I got out of the school band. I'm no longer playing the sport that gives me joy. And those things are aid recovery. They're not detriments. And people often don't fix the actual things, which are a bug, which are the things like social media use, or doom scrolling, or watching TV shows to no end. And I think part of the reason those things get so appealing is because they distract away from the discomfort of deep work. Whereas those break things we mentioned, like hobbies, talking with family, they actually enhance yourself. One of these things provides relief, the other one actually provides joy. And I think understanding the difference is super, super critical. So did your like week look like typically in year 12 or VC in general?
Yeah, so I had a pretty hectic schedule, I won't lie. I did quite a lot of things, especially in year 12. So maybe I'll start off with my sleep time, because that's very crucial. That's sort of what sets up the whole routine. So year 9 and year 10, I had shocking sleep schedule.
Yeah.
Terrible. And I decided over the year 10 holidays, look, something needs to change. Like, I can't just keep living like this, just sleep deprived all the time. So I decided from the very first day of the December holidays in year 10 that, okay, I'm going to fix this up. So what I decided was I'd be in bed by 9 p.m. every day, regardless of whether it's a weekday, weekend, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if I have something on. 9 p.m. I'm in bed. So, and it's very important in that as soon as I get into bed, I didn't go on my phone, right? That's crucial. Because I know there's like research done on this, but this was mainly just based on how I felt in the morning. But personally, when I went on my phone and fell asleep after scrolling on, what was it back then? There were no Insta Reels. Were there Insta Reels? No, I don't think so. What was it? TikTok. TikTok was
Are
out
we
back
dating
then.
ourselves a little bit?
Yeah.
Insta Reels.
I don't know if Insta Reels were out, but TikTok was definitely out. So after doom scrolling on TikTok for a bit, the next morning, it was super hard for me to wake up. I'd be like really groggy. And I trialed a period of time where I just didn't use my phone at all. I'd like read a book, sort of what I did when I was younger. And the sleep quality was way better. I'd wake up actually feeling refreshed. So 9 p.m. I'm in bed. By around 10, I'm sort of tired after reading. So I would sort of fall asleep naturally. And I'd wake up at 5 a.m. every day, right? So that's 7 hours of sleep. Now in year 12, from 5 a.m. to the time that I had to get ready for school, which was about 6:30-ish, so I have like an hour and a half window in the morning, I'd do my UCAT practice, right? And that was for the reason that you just mentioned previously. It's a pretty high cognitive task. It's very time pressured. You've got to think quickly. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of volume. So you got to be fresh. So I decided, you know what, that's going to be my morning task every day. And I did that the whole year until my UCAT exam. So Monday to Sunday. So at 6:30 I'd leave for school. 6:30 I'd start getting ready, and about 7:30-ish I'd leave for school. I had to take the train in, so it took about, give or take, an hour. And the good thing was I'd go on the train with my mates. So that was social time.
Yeah,
right? That's deep rest right there.
Fun times.
Exactly, deep rest on the train.
Yeah.
So like good banter on the train, and get to school, and then all the classes happen. And even in class, I'd try to still socialize a bit, especially because it was year 12. I didn't want to just throw away the year without any socialization, without any fun. So mess around with my mates a bit in class. Not a bit, I'd say quite a lot of messing around. But because of what I would do at home, it wasn't really, it didn't have a detrimental impact on me. So school time, that would happen. Free periods, sometimes I'd sort of do something productive. Sometimes I'd choose to chill out a bit. That was also an intentional decision, depending on what my week looks like, what SACs are coming up.
Yeah.
After school, I get home around 4:30. Sometimes I'd have cadets on. So I did cadets during VCE. On those nights, I'd get home about 8, 9. So that's a pretty significant chunk of time lost. But as we discussed earlier, that time is not wasted. Because once again, that's deep rest, right? And the friendships and relationships and I guess skills that I learned from cadets have shaped who I am today, right? All my closest mates are the people I met through cadets. And a lot of the way that I think about things, I guess some aspects of discipline, organization, timeliness, all those things were cultivated through that experience, right? Which sort of echoes what you were saying before about how co-curricular is super, super important. So I had cadets some weeks. Some weeks I had music, so I played the trombone from year 7 to 12.
Yep.
So I was in the band for that. So there were some early mornings, some after-school events, some events on public holidays, like we did Anzac Day marches, Anzac Day parade, all those sorts of things. So a lot of my time did go to those co-curriculars, which I appreciated, and it helped me rest. Now, on a day that I didn't have anything on, 4:30 I'd be home. I'd take a break for about, let's say, 30 minutes where I just go on my phone. So that's like my phone time, right? Catch up on anything I missed, what's on everyone's stories, what did they do, cool. And then I'm up to date. Haven't missed out on anything. And then from about 5 to 8:30, that would be my study time. So I've got like 3.5 hours to allocate to whatever I need to do.
Yeah.
And the prioritization of that is ultimately based on what's coming up, once again. So if I have an English SAC coming up, I'd spend quite a significant portion of that doing English. If I have a bio SAC coming up, Well, I didn't have bio in year 12, but you get the point. I do a lot of bio. So it's not really a fixed schedule. It's adaptable, it's flexible based on my needs at the time. And this sort of goes back to a point we discussed in our previous episode about planning the day, planning tomorrow, today.
Yeah.
I'd always ensure that before I go to bed the night before, the specific things that I want to achieve after I get home are listed out in a specific manner. So I know as soon as I get home, as soon as my break's done, cool, boom, 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 this is what I need to do.
Yeah.
I don't need to spend time thinking or figuring out what needs to be done. So yeah, that's my schedule in a nutshell. But as you can see, it was quite hectic. But the co-curricular still existed there and was a core part of it.
Yeah. Well, I think, Dalitha, we've touched on prioritization. We've touched on how we need to judge the quality of our study sessions, not by the hours, but by the actual output. We've discussed what deep work is and how to actually go about deep work and not feel overwhelmed by the discomfort. But finally, also how we all have limited energy and we need to not only decide what we want to achieve, but also what we're willing to say no to in order to direct our energies into the right way. Hopefully you guys found that useful, and for more episodes, keep following along where we discuss more tips and tricks about how to approach VCE and study habits in general.